They stole the mermaid's hair and awakened a curse buried beneath the sea. The villagers tried everything to be like her. Women copied her oils. Palace servants shouted her name with anger and envy. The chiefs and royal council grew afraid that their positions were under threat. Her so-called friends sneered when they mentioned her. The queen, she wouldn't stop watching her every move. Her name was Aria. Aria was just a common village girl, an absolute nobody. She had no title, no wealth, no influence. All she had was her quiet strength, her hands, and her diligence. She worked hard in the king's palace, humble work, supporting the kitchens and pressing kernel oil for nursing mothers. But Aria had something no one else had. Her hair, not just long hair that made strangers turn their heads in awe, hair that shimmered like sunlight on water. Yes, Aria was beautiful, but her beauty wasn't what people feared. It was her kindness, pure, consistent, sincere. Some called it fake, but Aria's kindness was real. And that hair, it was more than strands and curls. Aria used it to make ointments that brought people from far and wide. Even the bald king and his queen found favor in her. Her oils worked when no physician's hands could. Still, Aria never asked for fame. She never wanted power. She just wanted peace. But the world doesn't leave good things alone. Jealousy festered in the hearts of Odum's young women. Their envy twisted into something dark. And they made a plan, one they thought was brilliant. They would burn her hair with acid, but they had no idea. Aria was not an ordinary woman. She was something far older, far deeper, beloved of the ocean itself. When her hair was destroyed, the sea answered. Ghostly figures rose. The ocean churned, and war burst from the very depths, swallowing the kingdom of Odum whole. The lesson came too late. They learned the hard way. Sometimes the devil you know is better than the sweet angel you don't. Odum Kingdom was alive, buzzing like every other day. The market rang with voices, rappers rustled, goats bleated, children chased chickens through palm-lined paths. Smoke curled from rooftops, laughter rose, drums echoed, and in the middle of it all, Aria. While the town stretched and yawned, she was already working. She swept the palace's cold stone floors barefoot, humming softly. She refilled the palace water jars, helped nursemaids with newborns, and crushed roasted kernels in wooden bowls to make healing oils. She moved with the humility of someone used to being overlooked, but never careless. There was something about the way her fingers worked, slow, gentle, deliberate. Her scarf was always tied tightly over her head, but everyone knew. Beneath that scarf was something special. Aria had hair that made people pause mid-sentence, thick, flowing, dark as the ocean on a moonless night. When the wind touched it, it swayed like waves. Even elders whispered that it didn't just grow, it listened. Still, Aria didn't flaunt it. She wore the same dress every day, ate the same roasted yam from the palace kitchen, carried baskets heavier than herself, never once complaining. That afternoon, after returning from scrubbing the queen's corridor, she entered her tiny shed behind the palace garden, a warm, cluttered place that smelled of herbs and patience. She lit a small clay lamp, poured hot palm oil into a jar, stirred gently, and then the door burst open. "Aria!" Chica shouted, dramatically collapsing on the floor. Her voice rang out like a drum in the small room. "Please, your hair is already showing off. Must your skin glow too? My self-esteem is finished." Behind her, a daze laughed as she stepped in, arms full of clattering calabashes. "This one is dry as chalk," she said, shaking her head. "We need a refill." Aria turned to them, her face warm with amusement. Her voice came soft and playful as she motioned toward the bed. "Then sit down, my queens. Your scalps are about to experience healing." The room exploded in laughter. Chica flopped onto the bed with a loud sigh. "I really wish my hair was like yours, though," she said, pouting. "Mine has been falling since the Harmattan festival." Aria raised an eyebrow, her lips curved with gentle mischief. "Maybe your hair is tired of your bad decisions." Adai's nearly choked with laughter as she dropped the calabashes. "Or maybe it's your mouth that needs ointment first." The laughter echoed through the garden wall. They laughed like girls who had known each other since childhood. And they had. They had bathed in the same stream, stolen mangoes from the same tree, whispered the same dreams. But something had changed. Aria noticed it in the way they stared at her hair, not her face. The silence between jokes, the questions that never came aloud. Still, she chose to ignore it. After they left, Aria remained in her shed, bottling new oils. Outside, the sun dipped low behind the hills. The wind carried music from the market, and the ground beneath her feet felt still, too still. Later that week, Aria was mopping the palace entrance with a soaked rag when a shadow passed beside her. She looked up and froze. It was the queen, alone, unattended. Her scarf was drawn tightly, her face unreadable. She stood over Aria for a moment and then finally spoke, her voice quiet, direct. "Are you Aria?" "Yes, your grace," Aria answered, rising slowly. The queen looked around, then back at her. "Come with me," she said. Her voice was low, almost unsure. "I need your help." Aria followed in silence, her heart pounding. They entered the queen's private chamber. The room was quiet, safe. A golden bowl of warm water sat in the center. The queen sat slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her scarf. She removed it. Her scalp was thin, shiny, fragile. "They say your hands carry healing," she said, barely above a whisper. "I have tried everything. This is my last attempt." Aria didn't speak. She only nodded, walked forward, dipped her hands in warm oil, closed her eyes and began to rub. Soft circles, gentle pressure, a prayer in every stroke. The queen exhaled slowly. Her shoulders dropped, her body relaxed, and Aria's hands continued. The queen's hair began to grow. At first, it was just a whisper between the maids. "Did you see?" one asked, eyes wide. "There's new growth, at the back." Soon it became a quiet miracle at court. Her Majesty no longer wore her scarf. She walked with her chin higher. Her smile lingered longer. And then, it became a royal spectacle. By the third moon, she stepped into the public hall, with her hair combed into tight, elegant coils. She smiled like a woman reborn. The nobles stared. The wives of chiefs gasped. And the king? He beamed with pride. "What medicine did you use?" they asked, gathering around her. The queen only smiled gently and said, "Not medicine. Aria." That name spread faster than wildfire in the dry season. Aria was summoned by nobles, by village heads, even by foreign traders with different accents and desperate eyes. She began mixing more oils, not just for hair, but for skin, for baby care, for mothers who had lost their glow after childbirth. And the miracle? Every single one of them worked. Yet still, Aria remained the same. She refused payment, refused the large house the chiefs offered her. She stayed in her humble, mud-brick hut. She still fetched water from the same stream. She still helped beggars at the palace gate. But people notice, even when you pretend not to shine. One evening, the king gathered his inner court. They met behind closed doors, their voices low but excited. "This girl," the king said, lifting his goblet slightly, "is a gift. She has brought us more goodwill in 2 moons than our alliances have in 2 decades. He turned to the others. "Let her be given a title. Let her oils be packaged under the Odum crest. Let her name travel with our traders." There were no objections. Not a single one. The queen only nodded, slowly, quietly. By the following month, Aria had been crowned head of natural remedies and hair distribution. She was given access to the royal warehouse, to the trading caravan records, to the gardens where rare herbs were grown. And yet, she used none of it for herself. Instead, she trained other young girls. She gave every maid in the palace her special balm. She even helped cure the head chef's daughter of a chronic skin rash. But all of this, it didn't go unnoticed. Her childhood friends, Chica and Adizi, began to shift. Not loudly, not cruelly, just subtly. In the way they fell silent when she entered the room. In the way they stopped visiting her shed without explanation. In the way their laughter started late and ended early. Their smiles turned too sweet. Their questions came too often. One evening, Aria saw them by the village well, whispering with their mothers. As soon as she stepped near, the conversation ended, snapped shut like a door. They didn't even pretend. Weeks later, Aria was sent to Ikeoma, a rival kingdom. Odum had tried to form a trade agreement with them for years. Every attempt had failed. But the queen of Ikeoma was suffering. Baldness after childbirth had stolen her confidence. Nothing worked. No remedy, no priest, no oil. Aria arrived quietly. She gifted her a single jar, nothing more. Within 14 days, tiny black curls returned to the queen's scalp. The royal court bowed. They whispered of magic, of blessings. That same night, Ekioma signed a 20-year trade agreement with Odum. When Aria returned home, the king threw a feast in her honor. A golden chariot waited at the village gate. Children sang her name. Traders bowed and offered bolts of silk and baskets of golden beads. But she still returned to her shed, still stirred her oils by hand, still tied the same old scarf over her hair. One night, long after sunset, Chica appeared at her door. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. "You've changed," she said coldly, arms crossed, voice quiet. Aria didn't rise. She only looked at her. "No," she said gently. "You've changed how you see me." Chica glanced down, then back up. Her words came slower this time. "Everyone is talking, even the queen. They say you're hiding something." Aria's voice didn't rise. She simply replied, "I've never hidden my heart." Chica's lips tightened. "That's not the same as hiding who you are." The silence that followed wrapped around them both like fog. Chica turned, walked out. She didn't look back. And that was the night Aria knew. The eyes around her weren't watching in admiration anymore. They were watching in wait. It happened on an evening when the sky was soft and purple. The market had closed. The drums had gone quiet. The wind hummed low through the trees, and even the chickens had tucked into silence. Inside her tiny shed, Aria sat on the cool earth floor. Her fingers moved gently, tying ribbons around small bottles of oil. Her final batch for the week. Her back ached. Her hands were slick with shea and lemongrass. She was tired, but at peace. Then, there it was. A knock, not loud, not hurried, just soft enough to stir the memory of girlhood. "Aria, it's us." She rose slowly. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Chica and Adayesi stood there, smiling, too wide. Their arms reached for her in quick, eager hugs. Their eyes were sweet, but nervous, like they had come with something more than laughter. Adai spoke first, her voice soft, coaxing. "Let's go to the mango tree," she whispered, "like old times." Aria hesitated at the doorway. Everything in her spirit leaned back, but her heart, it still missed them. So, she followed. They walked in silence, their feet brushing dry leaves, the air thick with quiet nostalgia. They reached the giant mango tree by the stream, the one that had listened to their laughter for years. And just like that, they sat, like they used to. Back when the world was smaller and friendship was enough. A small fire crackled between them. They roasted groundnuts, took turns tossing them into their mouths, told half-hearted jokes that didn't quite land. For a brief moment, it felt real again. But then, the laughter faded. Chica stared into the fire for a long while before she spoke. "We've known you our whole lives," she said quietly, as if the words hurt to carry. "We shared Gary together, fought over slippers, bathed in the same basin." Adiz nodded, her voice barely louder than the wind. "And now, you're different, bigger than all of us." Aria didn't look at them. She watched the fire, watched a kernel turn black and curl into ash. "I never asked for any of this," she said softly. Silence followed, deep and watchful. Then Chica leaned forward, her eyes meeting Aria's. "Then tell us the truth." Aria's breath caught. She could lie. She could smile and change the subject. But her heart didn't know how to lie. So she told them. Her voice came quiet, so quiet the stream seemed to pause just to hear it. "I wasn't born like other children," she began. "I was found, wrapped in seaweed, crying on the rocks. An old woman raised me. She said, the ocean gave me to her." Chica blinked. A daisy stilled. Aria's words kept flowing. Yes, it's true, I'm tied to the water. When I enter it, I become something else. Something not fully human. She lifted her hand to her scarf, then lowered it again. My hair, it holds power. In my sea form, it glows, it listens, it protects. Her voice cracked slightly. But it is cursed too. If it's ever cut while I'm in that form, she swallowed, the sea will rise, and it will not stop until it has been avenged. The fire crackled. A groundnut popped. No one laughed. Then slowly, Adaze reached for her hand and gripped it tightly. Her voice trembled. We'll never hurt you. Chica leaned in with a soft smile, gentler than Aria had seen in years. Your secret is safe with us, she said. They embraced her, arms wrapping around her shoulders, warmth pressing into her skin. And for a moment, Aria believed them, but they were lying. Next morning, while dew still clung to the palace garden leaves, the queen received unexpected visitors. She sat alone in her chamber, combing her newly grown coils when the door opened. And in stepped Chica and a daisy. They looked nervous, but proud. They bowed deeply, their eyes downcast but their mouths full of secrets. And then they whispered. They whispered everything. Aria's name, the truth about her hair, the sea, the curse, the power. The queen didn't blink, didn't raise her voice, didn't thank them. She only stood, walked slowly to her window, and stared out at the ocean far in the distance. Her words came like stone. Cut the hair. That night, the sky over Odum turned dark earlier than usual. The stars were slow to come. A strange chill passed through the streets, but no one could explain it. Not even the chickens came out to sleep near the fires. And Aria? Aria walked alone. She followed the same winding path she had taken since childhood, the one that led through the garden, past the well, down to the water. It had always been her place of peace. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just moved, quiet, barefoot, still wrapped in her old scarf. At the water's edge, she stopped. The tide kissed her toes. She began to undress slowly, folding her wrapper beside the waves with care. Then she stepped forward, and the moment her feet touched the deeper water, her body shimmered, her legs faded. In their place, glistening emerald scales spread wide and alive. She was no longer just Aria. She was something older, something sacred. She swam into the moonlight like she was being called. Then she climbed a rock, pulled a carved wooden comb from her satchel, and began brushing her glowing hair, long, soft, and alive under the starlight. She hummed gently. The melody drifted into the wind, but behind her, shadows moved. Chica, Adais, and three of the queen's guards, cloaked in silence. They crept closer, their breaths heavy, their hands trembling. Each one held a blade. The guards moved in formation, but the girls, their eyes stayed on the hair. As Aria hummed softly, unaware, the blade was raised. A sudden gust of wind swept across the waves, as if the ocean itself tried to warn her. But it was too late. One swift stroke, and her hair, her glowing, divine crown, was severed. The silence that followed was unnatural. No waves, no breeze, no sound. The hair lay coiled on the rock like a dying flame. Chica stared at it, her chest rising and falling with panic. Adaz stepped back, her hands shaking. One of the guards dropped his blade with a sharp clatter against the stone. And Aria, she didn't scream, not at first. She turned, her eyes, once soft, now lit with an ancient grief. And then it came, the scream. But it didn't belong to Aria. It came from the sea, a cry so deep, so mournful, so furious, it split the wind. The clouds twisted, the moon flickered red, and somewhere far beneath the surface the ocean began to move. The sea pulled back, unnaturally far. The waves retreated from the shore like breath being held. And then, shadows rose. Out of the dark water came figures, tall and glowing, eyes like green fire, skin like polished coral, armor made of reef and bone. They were sea spirits, guardians of the deep. One had chains made of salt around her arms. Another had a crown of seaweed twisted with shells. They didn't speak. They didn't roar. They simply moved, moved toward the land, toward Odum, toward justice. And Aria? She stood in the shallows, hairless, heartbroken, tears sliding down cheeks that still shimmered with sea magic. She said nothing, just turned, and disappeared beneath the waves. The ocean, which had once loved her gently, now swallowed her like a mother in mourning. But it did not go quiet. Number It began to stir, to build, to rise, to remember. At first, the people of Odum thought it was just a strange wind, a breeze too cold for the season, a hush that sat too heavy on the streets. Fishermen paused. Mothers rubbed their arms. Even the birds flew lower. Then the sea began to retreat, slowly, steadily. The waves pulled back, further than the eye could follow. Boats tipped sideways in the sand. Fishes flopped helplessly on exposed seabed. Children laughed, chasing crabs across the drying shore. Fathers shouted for them to come back, but no one understood, not yet, until the animals began to flee. Goats tore away from their ropes and ran toward the hills. Birds circled madly above the trees. Even the palace dogs, trained to protect, tucked their tails and refused to drink from the royal well. But they were lying. The next morning, while dew still clung to the palace, then the scream returned. It cut through the kingdom like a blade, a sound not meant for human ears. 1,000 ancient voices crying as one, grief, fury, and judgment tangled in their breath. And the sea returned, not as water, but as wrath. It rose in silence, then struck in thunder. A wall of black waves charged toward the kingdom, taller than palm trees, faster than horses, alive with power. The sky turned the color of smoke, the clouds cracked open, and lightning flashed like the gods were splitting the heavens apart. Figures walked on the water. They did not sink. They did not speak. Sea spirits, tall, fearsome, draped in mist, crowned with shells. Their eyes glowed like emerald fire. Their skin shimmered with scales. They carried no weapons. They were the weapons, and they marched for Odum. The queen stood at her chamber window, clutching the last strand of Aria's severed hair. Her fingers trembled. She had tried to burn it, set it aflame in a golden bowl of fire. But the hair didn't burn. It didn't shrivel or smoke. It wept. Glowing tears dripped into the fire and hissed like ocean foam meeting coal. But it would not turn to ash. The queen's voice cracked as she screamed for the guards. None answered, because the palace was already drowning. Salt water erupted from the floor tiles. It poured from the cracks in the walls. It gushed from mirrors, from statues, from the eyes of carved ancestors on the palace doors. Portraits of past kings floated down the corridors like corpses. The palace, once proud, once holy, was now a vessel filling from the bottom up. The king tried to escape through the eastern hall, his robes soaked and dragging behind him, his crown lost in the flood. Gold bracelets slipped off his arms as he stumbled barefoot through the garden path. But when he reached the gate, a figure stood waiting, tall, sea-skinned, a sword of coral glowing red in one hand, eyes that shimmered like the deepest part of the ocean. The king opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. The curse had taken his voice. He clutched his throat, fell to his knees, his eyes pleaded. But the spirit didn't move. It raised its sword, not in anger, but in silence, because divine judgment has no need for noise. Across Odum, chaos bloomed like poison. Royal wells exploded upward, blasting water and seaweed into the air. Women shrieked as their hair fell in clumps, locks dissolving like lies. Traders dropped their gold in horror as fish with human teeth slithered from gutters, blinking and hissing like angry children. Pregnant women screamed in labor, only to deliver silence. Mirrors cracked across the kingdom, from palace chambers to roadside huts. No one dared to look in. And the children. Every child who had once mocked or insulted Aria woke up blind. In the flooded palace courtyard, the queen collapsed. She dropped to her knees, drenched and wild-eyed. She screamed to the sky, voice hoarse, hands grasping at the air. "Bring her back," she cried. "I was wrong. We were wrong. But the ocean did not answer. Instead, the sky did, and from above, Aria descended, not as a girl, not as a maid, not as a healer. She floated inches above the water, her body radiant. Her skin glowed with divine strength. Her hair, longer than ever, shimmered like moonlight poured into water. Her eyes burned green like ocean fire. She looked like something born before time, and her face held no joy, only grief. She hovered above the courtyard, hair rippling in the salt, heavy air, droplets of ocean light falling from her curls like stars. The queen stared up at her, drenched and trembling. Around them, villagers crawled through rising water. The palace guards had vanished. The chiefs cowered behind broken pillars. The nobles clutched their robes like shields. But Aria, she didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Her voice rolled through the air like thunder in slow motion. You stole what was sacred. You drank from the river of my kindness and spat into it. You loved my light and tried to trap it in your darkness. She paused. The entire kingdom held its breath. Then softly she said, So let your mouths never taste sweetness again. She raised her hand, and Odum collapsed. Fields cracked open, splitting like broken bread. Rivers turned black and flowed backward. Fruit dropped from every tree and withered instantly. The once busy marketplace turned to dust in a single gust of wind. The royal halls, gold-lined, pride-swollen, caved inward with a moan and were swallowed by the earth. Every drum fell silent. Every bird vanished from the sky. Every blessing the land once knew vanished. A silence fell. A silence so deep, not even grief could break it. And the queen? She was the last to fall. They say Aria descended, standing just inches from her, and whispered, You could have been healed, but you chose to conquer. And then, the wave took her. Odum was never crowned again. No king, no queen, no throne. The village turned to dust. The palace rotted in the sun. The gardens never bloomed. And still, on certain nights, when the moon is round and the sea wind blows west, they say you can hear the ocean cry, not in rage, but in remembrance. And Aria? Some say she lives at the bottom of the sea, brushing her hair with a comb made of bone and moonlight. Others say she walks the shores in the form of a weeping woman, helping broken-hearted girls and forgotten women grow what was lost. But all who remember her agree on one thing. Sometimes the devil you know is better than the sweet angel you don't sometimes. The devil you know is better than the sweet angel you don't.